Hi guys, and welcome to another Swiftly tutorial. So today we're going to be looking at the implementation of using GitHub in your Xcode applications. And it's pretty simple and easy to do. We're going to try and use a method that's completely void of the terminal and scripting and all this stuff. I'm going to use the tools that Apple has given us to give us a nice interface, look all of this stuff. So it'll be a really simple introduction of how to use GitHub with your Xcode projects. So let's begin. So to begin with, I've got my Xcode project here, and as you can see, I've used this in other tutorials. It's simply again this reusable keyboard tutorial. If you want to have a look at that, I'll leave a link on the screen now. But essentially, I'm going to now want to push this up to GitHub. So I'm going to open up a new Safari tab, and this, for example, is my GitHub. Now GitHub is essentially where I've stored all my projects. It's a source control. It's a version control system which allows you to essentially take snapshots of essentially saves in your projects, and then depending on what you want to do, you can roll back, you can go forwards, etc. And it's basically a really nice way of putting checkpoints in your project. So if you do mess up, you can wipe everything that you've done, go back to that point. So it's a nice solution to what you had to do in the past, which is what you might do in, for example, Word documents where you copy and paste it and call it version 2 or version 3. So it's a really nice solution. So what you'll need is a GitHub account, obviously. So if you just Google GitHub and then sign up for an account, it should be pretty easy. You'll just have an email address and password and create your own username. And then once you've followed that process, you'll have your account, which you can see here. So this is my account. That's me with my cool sunglasses in the top left-hand side. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to create something called a new repository. Now, the easiest way to describe a repository is essentially a dumping ground for your project. So if I click the plus button in the top right hand side here, it says create new, and click new repository, you'll see we'd be asked to give a project a repository name. So in this instance, I'm going to want to dump my project here. So to give it a relevant name, I'll call it reusable keyboard. So if I just put in here reusable keyboard, like so, you can then give a description, like so. So I'll just put a test, and then you can set whether or not you want it public or private. Now, if you want to set it as private, that means no one else can see it on the internet. It's just not open source, but you do have to pay for this privilege. Doing it public means it's free. So depending on the nature of your project, if it's to do with work, you don't want anyone else seeing it, then you probably you'd want to go private. For the sake of this tutorial, we'll go public. Then you have the option to initialize this with a README. Essentially, this is literally a text document which will describe the nature of the repository or the application stored within the repository. I'm not going to bother doing this. So for now, we'll just click create repository. So now we've created our dumping ground, as you can see here. So if we now go back to our project, like so, now what we're going to do is go up to source control. We're going to go to working copies, and then we're going to configure reusable keyboard. Then we're going to remove to remotes, and here is where we're going to do the connection between our GitHub account or our GitHub repository and our Xcode project. So in order to do this, we'll need to get this link here, and we'll copy this into our clipboard. We'll use the HTTP version here. Go back to our project, then we'll click the plus to add a new remote. We'll give it a name, reusable keyboard, so this is how we can distinguish it in Xcode. But most importantly, the address. And once we've done that, we click add remote. And then finally, we click done. So now that's connected up with our GitHub account. Pretty damn simple. So now, let's use some of the tools that GitHub provides. So Xcode has this built in under a menu called Source Control. I think this was first introduced in Xcode 5. I'm now using it version 6. So if we go to Source Control, now we have different options here. We have checkout, commit, push, pull, and refresh status. And we also have discard all changes. So let's start with commit. So if we click on commit, essentially it's going to bring up all the files that have changes in that do not exist yet in our repo. Now, seeing as we haven't pushed anything up to our repo yet, it's going to say that every file we've created is a change. So this is essentially our very first commit. So what I'll do is I'll write down initial commit. So down the bottom here, this is where you write the status of your commit. So for example, if you altered a button property, you would say change button property. So then when you went to look back at your history of commits, you'd know what you changed on that time period. And then down the bottom here, there's an option to push to remote. Now, you click here, it's unhighlighted because I've got this commit page open, but you would have the option to push it separately. So you can either push it at the same time as committing, or you could just commit it and then push it at a later time, maybe because you don't have the internet. Usually, for the sake of convenience, it's nice to do it all at once. So if we tick push to remote here, it's going to show our remote GitHub repository here, which is here. It's got in brackets here, create. This is because it's the very first time I'm pushing it up, so this is essentially going to create our project on our repository here. So now if we do this, I'll click commit. Now as you can see at the top here, it's very quick. It will say preparing to push, we'll do its stuff, ticks will appear, and it's all up, and that's it. Really simple. We go to our web page now, and we just give the page a refresh. You'll see that our project has been added, and that's it. You now have your very first version on GitHub. So now let's say we want to make a change. I think that maybe I want my self.view.background color to be equal to red. It's very important that it had to be red, and it's now worth saving these changes. So now what you'd normally do is you'd save it, and that would be it. Or you copy and paste it, like I said before. It'd be version 2, and version 2 contain the red color. Well, now instead of doing that, keep it all in one file. We'll now push a new checkpoint to our GitHub account. So again, we'll click source commit, and now you'll see one file is appearing with a tick next to it. And if you click on it, it will tell you what's been changed. So this is what's been added, and that's what it used to look like before. So this is basically the differences. This is the version that exists on the server, and this is the version that exists that has been changed. And as you can see here, it even has a nice timestamp with the person who initially changed it last. And there's our local revision. So let's add another commit message here. I'll say changed background color. Look at that, beautiful. So let's say we change the background color now. Push that up, ding, and it will go straight up. And then if we go back to our thing, refresh it, and then our latest thing will be change background color. Now these things still say initial commit because we haven't changed our Xcode project. We've only changed the file within the project. And we haven't changed our unit tests. Why that says 9 days ago is bizarre. that's not right. Yeah. So if we go back, yeah. So that's essentially pushing stuff to our project. So now if we go to source control again, we have the option to pull. So let's say we're working in a team of people and we're all pulling from this account. Now, we have a local version and we have a remote version, as we've just seen. So, depending on if someone else has pushed to our remote here, our local version on our machine is now out of date with that server version. So to fix this, we use a feature called pull. And pulling this, when we click pull, will essentially pull all the changes that exist on the server to our project. So at the moment, it's going to say our local repository is up to date because we're the only person contributing to this repository. Now, a problem can exist where changes have been pushed from another user to our server, but we have made changes on our local copy, but our local copy that's had changes isn't up to date with the server. So now we have a conflict where our server version has something that's been changed and our local version has been changed, and GitHub essentially doesn't know which is the one that's supposed to be changed. So what GitHub will do automatically for us, and it's also very, very clever, is it's going to try to resolve our conflicts by merging these things together. Now, it will do this automatically, but if it doesn't, if there is a very uncommon problem, it will, when you're pulling, present with a window like this, and then ask you to confirm your changes, so then it knows how to synchronize up to the server version again. Now, let's say, for example, I've made loads of changes and I've completely messed up my project. And let's say I've written, I don't know, 10 new classes and things just don't work. And I've made an absolute mess of absolutely everything. And you just can't find the bug. But you knew it worked at a certain a couple of days ago. Well, as long as you've committed to that version 10 days ago, you can revert back to that previous version. So what you can do is if the version you want is the latest version, you can click discard all changes, and that will bring us back to the local version that was last committed onto the server. So if I go back to here now, you notice it's all gone. If I built it, it's all fine. You can also, so I'll put that stuff back in, go onto source control and look at our history. And this will show the history of every single commit that we've made. And then clicking on it will show specifically in more detail what classes were changed, etc., etc. So as we click on here, we'll modify a file, and in that modified file, we changed the background color. So now using this, we now know, for example, which version to roll back. So let's say I don't want changed background color. I never meant to change it to red. That's an absolutely huge problem. Well, what you can do is use another application, which I'm now going to show you. And it's called basically GitHub's application. So if you just type in the GitHub app, this is the official app provided by GitHub. It provides, this is for Mac, but you can also get it for Windows. It provides, again, an elegant solution to doing this without having to use command line, which, it's powerful, but for everyday life, you're never really going to use those powerful tools every single day. So just to make things go along quicker, just use your simple tools. This is a nice thing to use and download. So you click that, it will go into your downloads, you install it, drag it into your applications, because it's a Mac app. And once you've done that, just click and open it like so. Once we click the plus button in the top left hand side, we'll go to clone, and we're essentially going to clone it from our server. So let's find our project here. Reusable keyboard, there it is. So that's pulling it from our server, which we've got on here, like so. Let's go back to the app. We're going to clone that. Choose where you'd want to save it. So it's just for now, I'll put it on my desktop. Like so. Desktop, clone. And then it's going to download it, as you can see by the cloud, and pretty quick because it's a very small project, and that'll be it. So now, like what I was saying before, we can see our history. We can also see the settings of a repository. We can also view branches. I'll get to that in a second. Here's our history. So let's say now, back where in that scenario where we're suggesting that I wanted to make it so that I never put that red color in, back to basically when I first committed it. Well, what I can do here is, using this application, I can click this version here, looking at this little clog wheel here, tap this, and we can either roll back or revert to this commit. So using this technique, I can now go back to versions, and just like when I clicked discard changes, it will discard all the changes back to any checkpoint that you specify. So it can be like, you can be back to the very first time you committed it if you want to discard every single change that's ever been made until that very first commit you made, or you can discard it just so it gets rid of that background color. So it's extremely useful. Now finally, we got the concept of branches. So we click on here. Branches are essentially, if you imagine that we've got a line that's running horizontal, essentially like a branch, you have then lines that can break off from that central branch. Now our central branch is our master, and these other lines are specifics, and essentially can be task specifics. So essentially, in this example, it could be versions of our application. So we can branch off to version 4, branch off to version 5. So a team or yourself can be working on branch version 4, whilst another team is working on branch version 5 for a future update. And then once branch version 4 is finished and published, that can be then merged into branch version 5, and that version 5 branch will inherit all version 4 branch changes, as well as all the stuff that's been put into version 5. So again, this is it's more detailed in the versioning again. So that's it. That's an extremely easy implementation. I think it's the easiest I've found to use, because it avoids using command line, etc. And I hope that's been extremely useful for you. If you want to learn more about Git, there are books on it, and there's stuff on the internet. I think even GitHub gives you some sample stuff to look at. So that's it, and I hope this has been useful for you. And my battery is low, so it's a good thing I'm wrapping up now. So I hope you have an absolutely awesome day, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Have any questions? Leave me a comment and I'll get back to you.